The European Movement, Portsmouth Indigenous Branch and other supporter groups to the Brexit Is It Worth It bus tour which has arrived here at the Guildhall in Portsmouth. Brexit elicits strong passions on both sides of the argument. Many of us recognise that this has turned out to be far more complex than any of us realised. The benefits of Brexit are as yet unproven and uncertain. But I think while the government has told us that from its own papers that this is going to cost us $2 billion a week, we know that there are many other things we're going to lose. And 20 months on, now is the time to ask ourselves, is it worth it? And that's what we are doing here, going around the country starting Wednesday last week and finishing, I think, the last stop tomorrow. So I'm going to hand over right now to Tim Evans, who's going to say a few words, then back to me and I'll introduce our three main speakers.
Thank you very much, David. Good afternoon, Portsmouth.
Hey!
Come on. Good afternoon, Portsmouth.
Hey!
Is it worth it?
Hey!
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out on this chilly afternoon. We've just come through Basingstoke and we stopped off there and in Southampton.
I've just been told that we have to move the bus.
There you are.
So, do we have a spot where we can put it?
Yes.
On a tour of the country, planning to visit 33 towns and cities across the country, asking the question, is it worth it? We are not refighting the referendum. The referendum is something that happened 20 months ago. But what has happened in those 20 months is that we now have some facts. We now have some information. And as I was just saying, there was another bus here around about 2 years ago that had a different number on the side of it. We've brought a bus with another number. I'm not a mathematician, but one thing I do know is that the other bus had a positive number, a number that we were going to be better off by. This bus has a negative number, a number that we are going to be worse off by. And we can argue whether the 350 million was right, and we can argue whether the 2,000 million is right. The difference is one was positive and the truth is negative. This is not our number, it's a number that's come from the government's own report. And it's a government report that the government don't want us to see. It had to be leaked to the press for us to know anything about it at all. It's not finished. Sir, you clearly don't agree with me. Would you like to have an opportunity to speak a bit later on?
Maybe, yeah.
Well, either yes or no, then I'll put you in the programme if you'd like to. You stay right there and I'll call you in a moment. Thank you very much. And that's very important because, as I've said, we are not here to refight the referendum. We are here to start a discussion, is it worth it? And we need to understand the arguments. Everybody who voted, whichever way they voted for genuine reasons that they believe to be right. But all we are saying is now that we have more information, let's ask the question, is it worth it? Now, I've been travelling for a week, and when we got to Telford, I rather stupidly left my coat in the service area. And when I got to Glasgow, it was getting a bit chilly, so I ran across the road and I bought this shiny new one. And the lady that sold it to me said, sir, if when you get outside, it's not quite the right shade of colour, if the zip doesn't work or if it doesn't fit, you can change your mind, you can bring it back within 28 days. Now, if I can change my mind about something as simple as a coat, I am sure that the country can change its mind now that we have the facts. Politicians make U-turns, the Prime Minister makes U-turns, and all we are asking is to be allowed to have not a second referendum, not a third referendum, but a first vote on the facts. One of the claims that's been railed against us as we've travelled around the country is that we do not respect democracy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, in spite of the attempts of Portsmouth Council to stop me, this is a free country, and I am proud to be British, and I am very proud to live in a democracy where we have the right of free speech. David David Davis said, if a democracy is no longer able to change its mind, it ceases to be a democracy. Jacob Rees-Mogg, bless him, said that for something as important as this, he felt it would be appropriate for it to be dealt with 2 votes. He seems to have changed his mind since then. But nevertheless, all we are asking is let's have a debate about it, let's have a grown-up conversation. We're not into slagging people off. There is nothing to be gained by yelling at each other across a crowded marketplace or even on Facebook and Twitter. It is a waste of time. We are all better than that, and we need to have the conversation. And therefore, sir, if you'd like to come forward and give us your point of view, I'd be very pleased to hear from you. What is your name? J to 11. I'm Tim Evans, so we probably come from somewhere not very far away from each other.
Just my point is, on this, I don't think really many people voted for the fact that it said 350 million on a bus.
No.
The majority of what people voted for was being able to take the control back and the sovereignty. And a lot of people see that Wales has been depressed by mass immigration from the EU. I grew up in Portsmouth all my life, and I've seen a prime example and a big driver of this was local taxi firm, Aquacars. It used to be a really well-paid job for people in Portsmouth to go into taxiing in between other work. But what he does now is he recruits directly from Eastern European countries, brings them over here and undercuts the locals. And I think that's the bit of the argument that gets swept over as racist, xenophobic. Me personally, money on the bus, I want our Parliament, who I elect, to control it, not unelected commissioners. And I've seen firsthand here how the importation of immigrants from Eastern Europe has driven down the money taxi drivers are able to earn, thus has pushed them out of the market, and we get taxi drivers, they don't know where they're going in Portsmouth, so we end up giving them the directions. So that's my biggest, that's for me personally. I also served in the army. I've got a friend, he left to train to be a welder out of his own pocket. The RS David Attenborough is being built on Merseyside. He'd done his initial qualifications, went to look for work. They weren't willing to pay enough because once again they undercut the local welders who earn £15 to £18 by recruiting directly from Eastern Europe and paying £10 to £12 an hour. So as you can see, there's just a couple of examples on how personally where wages have been undercut by EU mass migration, and that is what I believe has driven many people to go to the ballot box and say we want a referendum.
Bad employers.
Yeah, but the EU's giving them the opportunity. Yeah, but under EU law, they're allowed to do that. Those people are perfectly welcome to come here.
Bad employers.
Just a moment, please. Let the gentleman speak.
But it's like say, under the rules of the EU, I'm not saying that anyone who's come here should be said about played under the rules. The companies are playing by the rules, but the rules are of no benefit to us British citizens. And my family have lived here for so long. I think that it's not fair that in this country we should be fighting for lower paid employment because big companies can go somewhere else. It's all about globalisation, how everything's maximised, make everything cheaper labour, loads of labour. It cuts the wages down for here. That's why everything about this national living wage, if we didn't have such mass migration from Eastern Europe for cheap labour, then surely our wages would have risen naturally with inflation and the cost of living.
Policy, wasn't an EU policy.
Jay, don't go away, please. I want to say thank you very much. And I really, please don't take this the wrong way, I really don't want to be patronising, but what you've done as being part of the armed forces is also a real, I'm sorry, this sounds horribly patronising, but I wouldn't have the balls to do it, so thank you very much for doing that. This is what we need to understand. These are genuine reasons, as I've said, genuine concerns. And shouting at people doesn't help. If you have a different view, go and have a word with Jay if you're going to stay there. Buy him a coffee and then go and have a chat. I'm going to pick you up on only one thing. You were talking about unelected commissioners. The commission in Brussels is the same as our UK civil service in Whitehall. We do not elect our civil service in Whitehall. No, they don't. No, I'm sorry. The commissioners draft laws and frameworks and legislation as our civil service do, and then the elected European Parliament, voted for by us, vote on that. The EU, Jay, just a moment. The EU votes their parliament by proportional representation. We have a right to vote for that. Our democracy, our UK democracy, is a first-past-the-post system, which allows in the 2015 election a party that only had 32% of the vote to be in charge. That meant that 58% of the people in the country didn't want them. And our parliamentary democracy that we have now is held together by 10 MPs in Northern Ireland, where 65% of the population voted to remain in the EU. Now, we're being told, ladies and gentlemen, that the council are going to get the police if we don't move the bus. No? No, you're not saying that. Okay, so how do we get onto this? It was possible for Boris's bus to get on there, why not ours? Ah, now then, did we hear that? Did we hear that, ladies and gentlemen? Things change. Now, that's a marvellous lead-in. Thank you. I couldn't have done a better link if I tried it. Things change. And that's what we're talking about. Let's change things for the better. Let's not argue with each other about petty things to do with buses. Hi. Afternoon. Okay, no, that is a very valid point. We are blocking a fire route. Let's move the bus, please. Thank you very much. All you need to do is give me the facts and I'll make the decision. So, we're going to carry on without the bus behind us. I do apologise, but I'm going to hand back to David because I've said far too much. David, can you introduce the other speakers, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We've got three other speakers. Just going to say a few words. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Vernon Jackson, leader of the Lib Dems in Portsmouth. He's going to be followed by Vic Lothian, Green Party national spokesperson for education, parliamentary candidate for the Green Party on the Isle of Wight. And here are the small contingent of islanders for Europe that have recently set themselves up. And lastly, Thomas Gravatt, who was parliamentary Lib Dem candidate for Southampton Test and co-chair of the Young Liberals. So the three of them are going to say a few words and then we'll be getting ready to wrap up. So over to you, Gerald.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. Thank you, and it's an interesting contrast. When the Leave bus turned up, it was allowed to go into Guildhall Square, the place where all political activity and rallies happen in the city. But here, the place the council has allocated is at the end of a cul-de-sac for us. So I think we've got a really good example of free speech. And as I've led the council here for 11 years, I know the process. And the decision about whether people can use Guildhall Square or not is a personal decision from the leader of the council. So we now have a Conservative council here backed by UKIP, and we can see the result in terms of freedom of speech, which I think is a real disgrace. But I don't think we should be surprised by that. So ladies and gentlemen, three quick things. I think it's a really good idea to question, is it worth it? The referendum has been and gone, and we need to respect that result. We cannot go back on that result. But it looks as if we're going to go for a very difficult, hard Brexit, which means that we're going to just crash out of the EU, and we're going to crash into a different system. The World Trade Organization system, where we have a court that decides, with unelected people, whether we can trade and who we trade with and on what the rules are. So we'll have switched one group of people making decisions about us to another. But there are three good reasons, I think, why we here should question it. The first is that we're going to have less economic activity in this country, so there'll be less tax paid. So there'll be less money going into the NHS, less money going into social services, and potentially less money into pensions. And that's not good. The second reason is in terms of the port here. The port have said to us that we're going to have potentially large queues of vehicles within the port trying to get through the new customs barriers, because they're going to have to be searched. And there's no room in the port to do that. So we're going to have queues of ferries queuing through the harbour, trying to get in to unload people, and that's not a way to run a country. And the third reason, I think, is because this is going to hit the people on the lowest incomes the hardest. Boris Johnson and Liam Fox will be fine. They've got enough money, they don't care. But the people on the lowest incomes will see benefits cut, they'll see lack of protection, the protections that the EU's given them removed, and it's a really bad deal. So what we need to do is to go and argue out our case to say we think people need to think about this again. We've got to respect the outcome of the second referendum, but maybe there's time to do a third one. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for coming. It's a really good thing to question whether it's worth it, because the answer is clearly no.
Thank you very much. Now, on the question of money was raised. This bus is a crowd-funded project. Contrary to anything you might have read in the press, there are no city financiers behind it. This was funded by somewhere now between 700 and maybe even 800 people who put their hands in their pocket. Now, we raised enough money to travel for 8 days, but since we've been travelling, the interest has been such that we've raised more money. Thank you very much to everybody who's done that. And we now have enough money to run for 10 days. Some of those 10 days are going to take us into a snowy East Anglia in Essex and Suffolk and Norfolk. There is a bucket doing the rounds, and we are unashamedly asking for donations. We have also added a crowdfunder on the website. Those of you taking photographs, please make sure you post them, share them with your friends, show them the itinerary and encourage them to join us this afternoon in Chichester, later on in Brighton, where we're hoping that Caroline Lucas is going to join us. Now, very conscious of the time, I do now need to call the next speaker, who is Vix from the Isle of Wight. Come forward, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me tell you a little bit about the Isle of Wight. It's a bit of a rock, an isolated rock, a few miles further from Portsmouth than it was over towards the New Forest. I know how far it is because I've swum it. It took rather a long time and it was very, very cold, even colder if I managed to do it in February. And the Isle of Wight is separate from the mainland, and we are very vulnerable to a lot of decisions that are made, not only in Westminster but elsewhere on the mainland. And it's government politicians and it's the media that have preyed on these vulnerabilities. Propaganda, sound bites, fake news have been whipped up over the last 20 to 30 years, resulting in the votes that we saw a couple of years ago. It's this imposition of privatisation, of cuts and of austerity that has led people in the media to be blaming immigrants, blaming the lazy and blaming the European Union for the challenges that we face. And the fact is that is just not true. The Isle of Wight did vote Brexit, 60-40. Portsmouth, I'm very pleased that we've had a few challenging views today. My sister has moved from the Isle of Wight to Portsmouth. She's getting married in August in Portsmouth to somebody who voted Leave. And it split families. And this is one of the most damaging things that's happened in the last 2 years, is this split between brothers, sisters, parents and the younger generation. Because whilst the people on the Isle of Wight may have voted for the £350 million on the bus, they may have voted to stop immigration, they may have voted to take back control, but there are a number of things that the people of the Isle of Wight and Hampshire did not vote for. They didn't vote for a reduction in workers' rights. They didn't vote for job losses. We've seen job losses on the island at BAE and Gurrit. We're going to be seeing job losses at GKN. You can see what's going on in the news at the moment. People of the Isle of Wight and Hampshire, we didn't vote for higher food prices. We didn't vote to end the right to travel, to study and to work abroad. And we didn't vote for threatening to end the rights of 3 million EU nationals who live in the United Kingdom. And certainly, and from a history teacher very close to my heart, we did not vote Brexit to end 7 decades of peace, not just in Europe, but across the United Kingdom. And certainly, I believe, we did not vote to put Boris Johnson or Jacob Rees-Mogg or any other right-wing